In this video, we're going to go over 6 advanced strategies that only high-ranked players are using, but everyone should know these if you want to climb. So we're going to break it all down so you can get Grandmaster as quickly as possible. But if you want a little help along the way, my private coaching links are open in the description down below, and let's jump into it. Now, the first advanced strategy that I got to talk about is marking. And the idea behind marking is that you are tunnel visioning on one other person on the enemy team and basically making it so that person doesn't get to play the game. At the sacrifice of your potential value on other people, you are hard marking the enemy, whatever it could be. And let me give you a couple examples. So let's say that you're a tracer and you don't have a dive composition, you don't have anyone that can go in with you, and the enemy team are playing something that's a lot more dive centric, so they have a tracer on their team as well. As tracer, if you go and just go do your own thing, it's going to be a lot harder for you to go and get value while the enemy team is kind of destroying your team. So instead, you adopt a marking style against the enemy tracer, following them around, punishing them when they're out of position, and basically making it so that tracer can never go in with his team when they are setting up a dive, meaning their dive is going to go a lot worse. The idea here is that the vast majority of the time, you are simply marking the enemy tracer to prevent their execute and the team strategy that they're trying to enact. Let me give you another example. Let's say you're playing Orisa and you're going to mark the enemy Doom. Instead of going and running at their backline, trying to deal with DPS, whatever you normally would do, you are spending all your resources, all your time, all your effort, just hard countering the enemy Doomfist. Because if he's too aggressive, or if he doesn't adopt his play, he will just feed and die. And if he does have to play super passive, he's no longer going to be the hard carry. So the thing about marking that's really strong is that you can shut down whatever enemy strategy or character that is absolutely dominating your team. And by allowing yourself to mark in certain selective situations, you can end up shutting down enemy players that are actually overall better or playing better, but it doesn't matter and you can beat them anyways. And marking is a great strategy to incorporate overall, because I think if you learn when and where to mark, even if you're going up against, I don't know, pro players or top tier players, by being that annoying marker, you can really just shut them down. Now, the next big advanced strategy that you have to know when and how to do, it's squeezing, specifically ultimates. And what do I mean by this? This is the intentional delayed activation of an ultimate until as long as possible into a fight. So what happens normally when the enemy team pops a Kiriko ult? They pop that Kiriko ult, and what do? You pop it right away, right? Typically, that's what happens. Or the enemy team pops a beat, and you pop a beat. Well, the idea behind squeezing is that you wait as long as possible to invest your ultimates, especially if you miss that initial window, and then pop it later so that it extends further into the mid-fight. So instead of beating right away, you wait until your teammate's health is lower. You wait until the opponent's ultimates are just about over. The idea is that you're delaying as long as possible. The Sigma rises you up and no one's at fear of dying. You wait until right before you hit the ground before you beat. This gives your team more resources for after the Sigma ult ends and allows you to potentially make an aggressive play off of the tail end of your ultimate. With the Kitsune Rush, while I do think that ulting aggressively is typically better, or ulting first, if the enemy team pops their ultimate and they exhaust a lot of resources into you and speed into you, if you can back yourself up, delay, hold and conserve cooldowns, and then as the rush is close to ending or maybe even halfway through, you pop yours, theirs will end and they will have extended really into you, while yours will continue for much longer and the overlap is heavily in your favor. So the idea behind squeezing ultimates or using ultimates in this way is that you just give yourself more value per ultimate, and it's not as simple as just pressing Q when and where. It's about how you do it, how much you delay it by, and the overall full value that you can get out of these ultimates. It does require you to play on a really tight line, because if you wait too long to pop these ultimates, or if you don't see the right situation to pop them, you could end up wasting them. That's why it's a more of an advanced strategy than just, ulting at the right time. Now, the next thing that we got to talk about, the next advanced strategy, is fighting dry. And going in dry is your favorite activity, of course, but specifically talking about ultimates, when you are in a situation where y'all don't have any ultimates and the opponents have a ton, oftentimes you don't want to walk in and maybe use that one ultimate you got, or even ult at all, because you want to build up ultimates and potentially bait out enemies. See, the idea here is that you stack as a team, and you go in for a legitimate fight, of course trying to win it, but not necessarily investing ultimates or planning to, allowing the enemy team to invest whatever powerful ultimates they have. So you're walking into a fight, you present a strong fighting force, and then the enemy team invests Nanoblade. Now, not only did you gain ultimate, but you baited out that so that you could walk into the next fight with more ultimates. Now, this does require communication and a call, because if you go into this fight and then you start popping ultimates and the enemy ultimately wins, then, you know, maybe they use 2 and y'all use 2, and then you're at a wash, still at a disadvantage. The idea is that you're trying to flip the ult economy, forcing them to use and you to build, so that going into the next fight, you actually have ultimate advantage, and it's more likely for you to win that fight. But it's very, very important that everyone's on the same page here, that you call it or type it in chat. And of course, you could be thinking about what the ultimate win condition of the enemy is and pressure the enemy into overcommitting ults. So like hypothetically, if they have Nano Blade, by focusing the Genji, focusing the Ana, these characters are going to be more pressured into using an ultimate when they perhaps didn't need to. So by knowing what ultimates you're up against, this is going to make this a more effective strategy. Now, the next type of advanced strategy that you need to incorporate if you want to win more team fights overall, and that's hard committing for the sake, or inting for the sake of a successful combo. Let's go back to that Nanoblade example. This ultimate typically will team wipe if the opponents don't sleep him, hook him, CC him, or focus him all together, but the vast majority of ultimates like Nanoblade, they allow the Genji to go in alone and see what happens before they press the advantage. But this is not a really great way to do this, because you're not overloading the enemy's resources or attention. So instead, the hard committing is by pushing yourself super in, baiting out as many cooldowns as you can, forcing the opponents to focus you, and you might be going in so hard that without any follow-up, it's inting. So you're using every cooldown you have on Doom, or every cooldown you have on Rhine, or maybe even inting in there as the second support, the Lucio, the Moira, whatever the case may be. And the idea is that you're forcing that attention, forcing these cooldowns, because if the Nanoblade doesn't get interrupted, if there is a window for the Nanoblade to go through with less cooldowns to play through, less likely to get CC'd, less likely to get shut down, that ultimate combo is going to win the fight. And you could think about this with a lot of ultimate combos, where the idea is that you're hard committing so that you can enable someone else, and your death becomes a sacrifice to enable someone else's play. But that play is so powerful, so important to the win of the team fight, that it becomes worth it. And it needs to be up to you whether or not this is worth doing, but of course you have to make sure to communicate it as well, because if you go in without your team and there's no follow-up, you're just inting and dying, then they got to reset and wait for you. And of course, trying to ult or ult combo in a disadvantage, a numbers disadvantage, is not going to help anybody and has a higher chance of actually making it so the ultimate combo does nothing. Now, the next advanced strategy that we got to talk about is the idea that you can ignore certain heroes, and you have to ignore them if you want to win in a very strange, not direct matchup. So one of the big things that people say is like, what happens if I walk out on a composition? Let's say we walk out on Brawl. So Rhine, Bap, Lucio, Mei, and then maybe like a Sim, right? You walk out on that composition, but the enemy has a Far Mercy. You got no one that can really deal with it. The Bap can pepper it a bit, but no one can deal with the Far Mercy. What do? Do you just lose because you can't kill the Far? Is that just an auto loss and you have to go back to spawn? No, it's not. And this is not what pros or high-level players will do. What they'll do is they'll force the Pharah to be as little impact as possible. So the Pharah Mercy is trying to kill y'all. You're playing together. You're keeping each other healed. The Rhine is trying to tank the majority of the rockets, the majority of the damage. And you're trying to out-attrition the enemy Pharah Mercy. And you're looking for pivotal moments where the other enemy DPS, tank, or support is out of position. And you're literally leaving the objective to go and force that fight. The idea is that you take an aggressive fight, you try to get numbers advantage, and then you deal with the Pharah through attrition after you've already gotten that advantage. So you're not directly fighting into what the enemy wants you to do. And oftentimes, if you try to tunnel vision the Pharah too much, or don't realize that the only way out of this bad situation, hey, we don't have a hit scan, this sucks, is through. And the same idea could be taken with a similar composition. Let's say you're up against a Doomfist. Instead of trying to fight the Doomfist, allow the Doomfist to boop your team and playing into his game, you ignore him. You try to ignore his engagements at all possible, and you speed on or push yourself on to another target that you can kill. And the idea is that you're completely ignoring that tank, that matchup, because you can get value somewhere else. And this is really how a high-level player or a pro player will play a composition into what is a quote-unquote counter or something that has a good matchup. They avoid it altogether while trying to minimize its impact. And you're really looking for positional mistakes or weaknesses in the enemy composition so that you can go and capitalize onto those. Now, the last advanced strategy that I have for you is perhaps the most important, and it's one of the biggest ways to climb, whether it's GM, top 500, or even the highest ranks of play. Now, this is about the line of respect, and this is what you need to know. Zero respect to an enemy, where you go in, you push aggressively, you don't respect the enemy's ability, their skill, what they can do to you, and you're just W king at them. And it working is a huge amount of value, right? But zero respect to somebody that is punishing you turns into feeding. So you can't always have zero respect because some people deserve it. However, giving too much respect to somebody when they don't deserve it turns into a flaw. So it's about fighting that balance. How much should I respect this person? What can I get away with? Because if you're respecting someone too much to the point where you're not doing everything you could be, your impact level could be higher. You could take more aggressive positions. You could have gotten a kill, but you let it go because you were too afraid. But if you push yourself too far, give the enemy no respect, and they punish you for it, then you're going to become feeding, and you're kind of trying to toe that line. That's the trick in order to get the most amount of value possible. Find the line of respect that you should be giving to enemies, and always try to put yourself getting the most amount of value possible, but never breaching the line to where you can get punished for it. And it's going to be something that you move throughout every single game. You're going to start off with less respect and give someone the appropriate amount of respect over time, depending on their rank, depending on the respect or the ability that they show you throughout the game. And this is one of the best ways to adopt your play to get that most amount of value and hard carry the most, even up against great players. But if you have any questions, definitely let me know down below, and smash that like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.